Could I introduce Dr. Liz Nelson to you? In our intro, we said she's an extremely successful businesswoman. And you're going to be sharing with us tonight your experience and your hints and tips. And we've been talking earlier on, and the main focus is going to be about consultancy. So how to, well, I don't know exactly what she's going to say, but she's going to talk to us as consultants about us doing our consulting businesses and I hope how we can develop our consulting businesses as well. We've all heard of Taylor Nelson. Well, this is the N in Taylor Nelson. So founded in 1965. Yes. So I was 12. I was 12. Yes. And you also have won in 2011 the Lifetime Achievement Award at the First Woman Awards as well. That sounds fantastic. Very good. But you're now in a business called FlyResearch, which I think is a, would you call it a small to medium agency, or is it just getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
No, very small.
And that's very much to do with mobile and online and all that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the format is that Liz is going to talk, and she said she's going to be controversial. So therefore she wants to be interrupted. Okay. So at any point, please raise your hand and we'll have a bit of a discussion. So Liz, off you go.
Thank you very, very much. I'm delighted to be here, but I think I'm a bit of a fake. And I genuinely mean this. I could learn much more from a lot of you than you can learn from me, and that's not false modesty. I was out of research from 1992 until 2001, and to come back full time quite recently was 2007. So I'm still catching up, and I mean that. And the reason I don't want to talk solidly is I really want your responses to what I'm saying. I asked earlier whether I should put the emphasis on setting up a company or whether I should put an emphasis on what I believe about consultancy at the moment, and I was told that I should do the latter, but I'm going to start with the former, and I'm going to make a few controversial statements which I hope you'll tell me to shut up, or, you know, please give your own views about. Yes, we set up Taylor Nelson in 1965, and I could genuinely say to all the females in the room, I have never experienced any prejudice against women in market research, largely because it was early enough that people in the field remembered all of the women in the Central Statistical Office of the government and all the women who worked as statisticians and researchers during the war. So I really, until recently, I have certainly experienced what it must be like to feel that you're a lesser being if you're female, but I'll come back to that perhaps if I can, because it is quite interesting that it's still around. And although I had been chairman of a publicly quoted company, I was told that I shouldn't chair meetings because I didn't have the correct experience. Thank you, ladies. Why did we set up Taylor Nelson? I had been trained at Mars, wonderful training, and I can just say, by way of introducing the consultancy aspect, can you believe that in those days, Mars did their own retail audit? They contracted out nothing. Every week, they checked the sales in a sample of retail outlets. It was incredibly accurate. Everything was done in-house. Coding, interviewers were employed full-time. It was so different from today. But for a trainee, it was a wonderful experience. I then went into an ad agency without any doubt whatsoever, the buzziest atmosphere of anything I've ever worked in, wonderful. Was with mass observation. Now, how many of you really remember what mass observation was like?
Old type mass obs or new type mass obs?
The old MO. Do you remember what it was like?
I don't remember, I've read a bit.
Okay, you've read a bit. You certainly don't remember the 1930s, but you might remember the 60s and 70s when it really had lost touch with its observational roots. They did wonderful research during the war, literally observing people, and some marvellous descriptions, literally just observing how people were behaving.
Didn't that start with Housewife 49, Nella Last?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. Any other memories of Massab?
John Parfitt, remember?
Oh, yes, yes.
And the
Now,
Parfitt
he
Collins.
improved them a lot. They really were so unbusinesslike. But yes, John Parfitt made a big difference. Yes, he did. Any other memories of Massab? Ethnography, of course, is now back in fashion, and it's just a pity that all of the Massab expertise has gone out the window. It was started in Borneo, believe it or not, in Borneo before the war, observing animals, and the two founders came back and thought that probably if you could observe animals, you could observe human beings. Anyway, to make a long story short, I was there at Massab with Tony Cowling, who eventually became the CEO of Taylor Nelson Sofras, and Hugh Stammers, who was a statistician from UCL. And I went to them one day and said, I've seen an ad. Some American guy is looking for a managing director to start a market research company. He was working for the Economist Intelligence Unit. His name was Stuart Taylor. He had amazing connections, in particular David Wolfson of the Wolfson family, and he guaranteed us, a bank guarantee rather, of £30,000. We never had to use that £30,000. I think this is probably fairly unusual. Would you agree? You didn't actually, we didn't have to go to look for outside.
How much
money.
is that worth now? 10 times?
Oh yes, easily, yes. But we kept our clients, and Mass Observation were indeed very civilized. They let me take a huge Clark's shoe study with me and finish it off in the new company, which was amazing, really. I mean, luck. You know, there's a big debate going on as to whether or not luck is important for entrepreneurs. I have no doubt whatsoever that. Well, what do you feel about it? Do you feel that luck has played a part in your?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're not ashamed to say it, are you?
No.
It's important. Yeah. Well,
you have to do some things to kind of create the space to sort of find it and spot it when it's there, I think. But yeah.
I think that's there is a huge debate going on now at the moment in a woman's network for entrepreneurs as to whether or not luck is important or whether it's an imagination. I'm sorry, I think it's important. I think it you know, the timing.
A maxim an old colleague of mine always used to say was, luck is where planning meets opportunity.
Oh, lovely.
Is that?
Napoleon used to say, give me a lucky general.
Yeah.
Napoleon,
Very
give me a
good.
lucky general.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we certainly had luck, but what we noticed, and I think this will ring bells with some of you, what we noticed is that all the companies which were out there in 1965, Sales Research Services, British Market Research Bureau, then the subsidiary of J. Walter Thompson, yes, Lintas and Unilever had a research department which was very, very good. But all of them, every single one of them, without exception, were selling products, not solutions. And we said to ourselves one day, we don't want to sell products, we want to know about a particular market. And so we were the first in to employ people who knew about healthcare, who knew about food and drink, who knew about finance. And that's the way we started, and we felt there was a need for it, and indeed there was. It took us, however, 10 years to get to £1 million turnover, but again, it was very different in those days. But we each of us specialised, Tony in food and drink, Hugh Stammers in healthcare, and built up really the largest healthcare ad hoc research, the first to interview doctors in any depth and in any numbers. So we were looking, then we bought a financial services market research company, we bought sales research services, and it really went wonderfully well. And still keeping to this, we will solve problems, we want to know, and this is important to you as consultants. The one mantra we had was, what is the expected use of results of this study? And I'm going to come back to that, and if I don't, remind me because I'm senile. But it is rather important that I think very often these days consultants are given a topic guide and take it as read without questioning it, without really suggesting that possibly one should look into how the results will be used, and should qualitative research be done before this topic guide is agreed. And it worries me a lot, but I'll come back to that. Please, I will come back to it. Anyway, the controversial bit that I'm going to say, and I mean it quite genuinely, is that the biggest mistake I personally feel that I ever made was to take the company onto the stock market. I do not think that business services as a whole lend themselves to the stock market. I think they lend themselves, and why, for God's sake, this country has developed mutuals and co-ops, and yet nobody seems, and I'm sorry the co-op is in a state at the moment, but John Lewis and Waitrose are thriving. Why don't other people use that particular model? And in particular, why don't business services organizations use it? When we went onto the stock exchange, can I just say that 25% of our staff owned shares or share options, and I was very proud of that. We had started it, why for God's sake didn't we continue to a logical end, but we didn't. I'm going to stop there. Please disagree with me.
So taking the, you're very clear that taking the business into the stock exchange was a mistake. I think some of us can perhaps presume why, but what would you say were the main reasons? I mean, how did it affect the business or the staff, or what?
Oh, above all, the one thing I would say is it changes your view of 7 years out to 3 months out. I mean, the short-termism of a publicly quoted company is just disgusting. And I mean that, it really is.
But we're in an environment where, particularly financial services, but I would argue other sectors as well, the regulator is not encouraging the concept of mutuality because it's too hard to regulate.
That's a very good point. But do you really mean that? Because I think that the miners' recommendations for the co-op suggest that there are ways in which you can regulate it. I mean, I don't know them in detail, please, I really don't, I couldn't be questioned, but it seems to me he's found a way of regulating it.
Would you have been happier then, your legacy from Taylor Nelson, to be a sort of Waitrose type business?
Yes, yes. I would have never left to do charity work or public sector work, which probably I would, I think was very good for me. But though I think the loyalty to a mutual or a co-op is pretty thick, goes a long way now.
One question is, at the top end of our industry, and I don't mean quality top end, I mean size top end. They may be related sometimes. At that end, the business has become more and more multinational, transnational, and so on. Arguably to service the multinational clients, but possibly it's coming from the inside. Do you think the John Lewis type model, mutual model, cooperative model could operate on a transnational basis? For example, or slightly, to take an example, big accountancy practices, big law firms are partnerships notionally,
Yeah.
but their notional partnership is not quite on that mutual basis. So is there a point at which, once one goes beyond a national organisation to international, the model may fray around the edges a little?
I can only say it would never work in the, I'm sorry, I should say it wouldn't work in the States. It would be very difficult to sell the idea of a co-op or a mutual in the States. But you only have to look at the success of the co-op in Europe to know it wouldn't. And it would work in Europe. Would it work in the Far East? I don't see why it wouldn't. I certainly think if I were going that way with mutual, I would go to Singapore. I think it would appeal. The whole business atmosphere of Singapore, I think, would lend itself to that. But what do the rest of you feel?
I'm wondering what the real barriers are then, because people talk a lot about the John Lewis model and hold it up, but particularly the last few years as this, but what stops people following that then?
Well, may I put one thought to you, that it's straight greed, and there is, the RSA is having a lecture on this very subject by David Marquand, and at lunchtime fairly soon, and you could look it up, you could listen to it if you can't go, and it is the question of greed, and it's all about this subject.
In a sense, isn't the spirit of John Lewis that it came from a paternalist background, that it turned from a family business into the mutual by
Absolutely.
the generosity of John Speed and Lewis.
Yes, absolutely.
So it came from the top rather than from the bottom or from the sides. Or
Agree entirely. And it does take, I'm sorry, Cadbury's and Fry's and all that went with the best of the Quaker firms also started with paternalism,
Yes.
but indeed became something different.
Indeed.
And I think what we lost when Kraft bought Cadbury's is just terrible. But I'm sorry, that's not a subject.
And it's also been proven that family firms, in fact, tend to be much more profitable in the long term.
Precisely right.
And they tend to be more
Thank you. Yes.
paternalistic.
Absolutely right. But in the end, what they have done, and I'm thinking of the Mars company, which is, God, which has gone through agonies, but it is still a highly successful company, and it still has the family values.
My husband works for Mars and they have very strong ethics, for example, about marketing to children, which I don't think you'd see other international food brands.
Does the name Andrew McIntosh mean anything to anyone? Do you remember he started?
Leader of GLC.
Yeah, he was leader of the GLC, but he started a market research company. Facts. IFF, thank you, IFF. And 2 weeks before he died, he gave an interview to Phyllis Van Gelder and myself. And his father was managing director when I first joined Mars. And McIntosh, Andrew's father, was a well-known communist together with Jenny Lee during the general strike in 1929, I think. And he met Forrest Mars in the 30s. And it had never occurred to me, but many of the principles and the values of Mars are highly socialist. I mean, I can remember you walked into Mars and no director had a separate office. We were all absolutely rows and rows, open plan, and it worked brilliantly. And Andrew said, didn't you realize that? The very fact you all had to clock on, don't you realize that was my father and Forrest saying, we have got to have equality across all this. No, it hadn't occurred to me, to be perfectly honest. But it is still, I think, a company with hugely wonderful values.
But that just goes to show the difference in approaches to mutuality or paternalism, because the very first time I went to the co-op, they had different floors for different grades and different lunch rooms to dining rooms. Genuinely, and I'm 47, I'm not that old. We're not talking about the last, the 19th century here, we're talking about the 20th century. And I was astounded, and yet they, at the time, were held up as being the cooperative in the UK.
Yeah.
A lot of building societies were like that, as well, very hierarchical.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they were
organisations.
mutual.
One chap that I worked within a commercial mortgage organisation came from the building society, senior manager, and he was surprised that people didn't defer to him in the corridors as he went past. You know, sort of, stop and acknowledge how senior.
Salute.
Absolutely.
I'd like to try and take this idea of mutuality and cooperative a little bit further, in that
Please.
we're an organisation of 400 individuals, and our rules are that you have to have fewer than 3 full-timers in your business.
Yes.
That's the rule.
Yes. Yes.
So some of us have maybe 1 person working with us, or sometimes 3, but the vast majority are independents working for ourselves. Sometimes limited companies, sometimes we are sole traders, but that's the setup. Let me just throw this at you. Is there any way, I mean, we do work together, but it tends to be 1-to-1, 1-to-2,
Yes.
and we try and market the ICG, but we don't market it as an agency. If we were, we'd be the biggest research
Absolutely.
consultancy in the world, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So, any ideas about whether we, the ICG, could become a cooperative?
Wow.
Well, you started it.
I quite like that. And my word, it would be very, very, very effective. Particularly as I gather, you tend to specialise, and it's quite clear what you specialise. Have I read the website correctly? You are very distinctive in what you're offering and the sort of consultancy you're offering. Am I right?
Yeah, generally speaking.
Oh, then why not?
But the culture also suits a mutual of some sort, because it's all very supportive.
Of course.
You know,
Of course.
we'll
You're
help each
helping
other.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah, we believe we're a family. I mean, it's very,
Absolutely.
very much like that.
Well, then why not?
Okay, we'll have another conversation.
I think you'll find that there's more interest in mutuals and cooperatives now than there was, a lot more than there was a few years back, only because of the criticism, I don't have to tell you, about the capitalist system, which is getting a bit boring, but there are people are changing, I think, their minds about mutuals and co-ops. But I should move on, shouldn't I? And really I'd like to talk about today, and this is where I'm on very thin ice because you know so much more about this than I do. But I work for Fly. We do online and mobile, and the strapline is quick, clever, helpful, and to my mind that completely summarizes how market research has changed in the past 20 years. The emphasis on speed, the fact that we get in a topic guide on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock and 5,000 interviews the following day at 10 o'clock is considered a huge success. The way I'm saying it, you'll realize that I'm not sure that this makes for the best research. And I think very often, and I'm going to talk about the place of consultants, because there are consultants and consultants, the consultants and altogether management consultants actually put together are by far our biggest source of income. And there's no doubt about the fact that where previously I would have added whatever knowledge and expertise and insight when the data was available, most of it would have been at the end when data is available. Now, if there's any consultancy, it's up front and getting the questionnaires and the sample right. And this is so different. Full stop. Do you find the same thing? I think you get more involved in the analysis of data, don't you?
Yes, we don't get time to do it. That's the big issue that's happened over my career, is that the time used to be invested after the field work.
Absolutely.
The issue is not that research has changed, it's that the client has changed
Yes.
so much in the last 20 years.
Well,
So,
yeah,
you know,
but
where that leaves us with no responsibility there, and
Yeah.
surely it's our responsibility to push back against that. To
Agreed.
go, well, no, if I'm going to do a good job,
agree.
I need an extra week.
I think that's the magic point there, do a good job. Liz had the great good fortune to start her career client side and build it on that side. A lot of people, not me, a lot of people in my generation spent their career zigzagging back and forth between client and agency.
Indeed.
I think that
Indeed.
has substantially gone. I think there's a huge
I agree with that. That's a good
Berlin Wall
That's a
between
good point.
consultancy or agency researchers
Yes.
and
Yes.
client side insight management
That's a
people.
very
And
good
I think
point.
that is detrimental to both sides. I think the second thing is that that leads on to a notion that I've got typewriter, sorry, I've got a word processor, I can write a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is all, the notion of sample is how big is it, as opposed to how representative it is. And that understanding, I fear, has gone, not exclusively, not entirely, but in some cases, from the client side. And I agree with you, Sam, that that's where we need to be pushing back as hard as we can. But very often it's, I don't care never mind the quality of your width, it's, I need an answer, my boss needs a figure on his desk tomorrow or the day after or whatever. And I think that's a very scary thing.
So what's your view about clients and how they change?
The biggest sorrow for me is that clients are in the DIY market research business. They, more and more of them want to do it themselves. More and more of them don't have trained market researchers within their midst. I'm sorry, that to me is a huge mistake. And whenever I can, I do say it, and that's why I believe that one of the biggest things having said I didn't start off selling products, I would say that selling qualitative research to clients, just to check that they have considered all of the needs of their client, their customers, that needs to be done. And whenever I can, I try to push that, but it's very difficult. But I think it's important.
Can I just ask, Liz, I don't recognise this picture of a client coming in and giving me a topic guide. Now, are we talking about quant or qual here?
Unfortunately, almost entirely quant.
Okay, because I tend to focus more on qual. So when
Well,
you say topic guide,
yeah.
I'm thinking how, because there is a lot more consultancy in my experience in the qualitative side. Because
Indeed.
you need to take the
Agree.
brief, you need to work through it.
Agree with that.
So it's all part of.
I shouldn't have used the word
process.
topic guide. We're given a list of questions.
Okay, I understand.
And,
Okay. And then hence the speed and everything else.
Precisely.
Okay.
Although I have to say I'm talking about my experience, if you're working with US or Far Eastern clients, that's more what you're expected to do. I've worked with topic guides of 10 and 12 pages.
Yes.
No, and it's,
I know.
and it's the thing is, it's a different mindset. What they want is quant.
Sure.
They call it qual and it's focus groups, but what they're looking for are numbers.
Exactly.
So I mean, I haven't been in a position where I've actually been asked to do that, although I have been in groups who were looking after us like global projects. In that circumstance, will you take it on, or will you insist on doing it?
The project will be done that way whether I do it or not. And the other thing is we were hearing, I think, from Sam, well, if you not quite, but if you don't do it that way, I need another week or whatever. I'm afraid the client will very often say, I'll get someone else who will.
Because speed is the essence, and they will not have the time to argue. It's very worrying.
And I think it's very easy to blame clients and say, that they don't understand, they're wrong, we just need to tell them that you will. Which and I do think there is a case about pushing back and explaining why. But I think they are operating in a world which has changed, and we need to kind of adapt to respond to that, because that whole world where they need the information and the decisions they need to make all has to move much faster than it used to. I think.
I make it sound too simple.
You're right. You're right. But I mean, is it going to give a lousy rep out? And it does. Can I just say that sometimes you have to be a little bit sort of play a game with clients, and one thing that we have done, which has worked to a certain extent, is particularly when they are looking at a new product concept. You all know how often these days that there will be an internal meeting of that client who has his advertising agency, the finance director, the marketing director, the insight director. The person that's missing is the consumer. So what we say, we have sold actually successfully to slow down the process of new product development, and it is a question of slowing down, is we call it customer in the room. We warn our panel members on a Sunday night that there's going to be an email come through, would they be prepared? And it is incredible how quickly large numbers of people will respond. The client then rewrites the concept if it needs to be written, and it goes out again and again and again all day long. And it is fabulous. And we're in the business of trying to slow down the client. Is that speed really necessary? Isn't it more important, as it were, to think of other ways of doing the ad or doing the concept or product or whatever it is? Am I making sense?
But don't we live in the age of instant?
Yes, unfortunately. Yes,
And the clients get younger, of course.
Yes.
Robin?
Sorry, I think it was like when I went into advertising, and great agencies used to tell clients, no, you can't have that, it will take 3 weeks. No, we won't do that. What, you want your pack shot in the ad? No, that will wreck the idea. And there was a whole different way of working in those days. And I think picking up on your point in terms of after, in terms of instant, what I think now is that clients will accept less thinking, less insight, faster, quicker. And there's some matrix there or some graph there or somebody that, there's a point of, I'll take that because this will give me enough information that I'm not going to make a huge mistake, or it will give me enough information that I can work out which of these new opportunities I should pursue. And the technology is helping them do that.
You're right, you're absolutely right. I mean, another way in which we have tried to slow down the client is by doing research after they have made up their mind, of doing research on the same subject and just showing what the results can be if certain things are changed. And you can get them possibly to reflect that, is speed really that important? But anyway, there are 3 questions that I really feel if I were to do an ops threat sort of analysis of the ICD, I would come up with
the ICG.
I beg your
ICG. We've got a
ICG.
song.
ICG.
Like
I'm sorry. No, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I'm senile. I can't remember. ICG. 3 questions, which, because we do so much among consultants, and I think it isn't that different from what you are doing. How do you differentiate yourselves from the likes of KPMG? How do you sell your business, your assets, if indeed it's just you and 2 others? And finally, how do you best demonstrate your excellence? And this is close to my heart. Does it help being a fellow of the Market Research Society? Does it help being a member of ICG? What profile, what prestige are you pushing to promote ICG? Are you doing published papers? And is there some other recognition which you personally should get? I am really a huge exponent of all of us getting non-executive experience or trustee experience in the public sector or charitable sector, but the first 2 at least pay. I just think that you can establish credibility and distinction and excellence. And you've got to, because otherwise, believe me, Ernst & Young, they really do have very bright people who can analyze big data and do it very effectively. You're bringing something else to the table. And how do you demonstrate that? Those are my 3 questions to you, but
Is that not something to do with the nature and lack of confidence of market researchers?
yes.
Because anyone in the room here, I guess, would
Yes.
say, "Oh, crikey, I'm not KPMG standard, I potter along down here somewhere."
Oh, I
So,
don't know. I don't know.
well, what?
The answer to the first question was they're not a lot cheaper. I don't know if that's something I want to shout about.
That's probably not your excellence.
There is also there's always a model, at least one model, isn't there, that the likes of KPMG have. There's a way of approaching, or there's a lens through which they approach the world.
Correct.
And however clever they are, they're still kind of forcing their thinking through a number of models and lenses. And I think we have the freedom, I mean, I speak as a sort of qual ex-ad planner, but
Yeah.
we have the freedom, if you like, to be much more open about what the result is in
Agreed.
terms of answering a brief.
Agreed.
So that's how I'd certainly answer, plus cheaper, but I'd certainly answer the KPMG question that way.
It's gymnastics rather than brawn.
But how do you, I'm sorry, I'm not in, I was only in advertising for a short time. How do you promote that?
It's really, really
Well,
difficult because I think the problem with the research industry, I think historically, is that they would give the research debrief to the clients, and the clients might then ask the research agency, what do you think about X? And they might reply saying, well, we didn't ask the consumer that question, so we can't answer your question. And that's where your likes of McKinsey started it all in way back, started coming in. So I think possibly members of the ICG are more prone to give their opinion because they're not.
I think that's probably true.
Well, that's
Having
good.
worked with Sam, she's really vouch for that, both of us, but anyway.
We do that.
We're prepared to go out on the limb because we haven't got some big corporate behind us saying, well, how on earth did you say to the client
Yeah.
X, Y, or Z? Where's the data? I've just heard his boss phone up and say, oh, do you realise that one of your people said X, Y, and Z?
But Robin, that's exactly one of the reasons why I became independent. I became independent in 1983. It's a long time ago. Started working for myself because I built an agency, but started working for myself because I was being held back by the company I was working for. I wanted to say things, I wasn't allowed to say things because it was against the company interest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, and I'm sure many of us would agree, we can say exactly what we like. We know what the risk is, we can be shown the door.
Yeah.
But we say exactly what we think based on our experience. I think this is the way you should do it. But how do you turn that quality into a selling message then?
That's what I want to know. Yeah. I think it would be a wonderful debate to have. I really do. Do any of you?
Sorry.
Surely the answer lies, in the personal relationships we all have with certain clients, so that they will know, they'll phone you up and say, what do you think about this, rather than do this research. And you sort of build that consultative type relationship with individual clients. Now how you package that and try and extrapolate that on a sort of cooperative, which sounds awfully nice, but the fact that we're all independent is we're all independent to deal and work with other people, really. We will in the e-forums, it doesn't cost us any money, and we might make an introduction and all that stuff. But in terms of how you put that into some collective brand proposition, that if you come to a member of the ICG, you'll get a very smart researcher at a very good price, because that's a given, but they'll also have a point of difference and an opinion. Now that could be quite interesting. There you go.
I like what you're saying, but can I just ask you, have you personally ever used a PR person to publicize the wonderful insight which you have found for this particular client?
But it's all proprietary.
Mm.
We don't own it.
I know, but don't have any of you.
Yeah, no, I did, well,
Tried.
I pushed a case study from a client out,
Good,
which got published in the MRS magazine.
good, good.
But the exception was, I think somebody said they won't let us, he was actually being made redundant, so he was looking for a new job. So we wrote a case study together, and I said, Phil, we're really going to milk this one. And we did. He's got a new job.
But you see, it's always the argument about PR is that this is confidential information. But there are examples, there really are examples out there where I think the ICG and its members could make more of its expertise. And I really do believe that. Let me just say, we were approached by a PR company which had been, very surprisingly, had been employed by a mental health NHS trust. And the reason the psychiatrists pushed it is they felt that the incidence of self-harming among teenagers was just being downplayed and people did not understand just how prevalent it was. We asked our panel, and may I just say we had to ask parents for parental approval for those, and of course we followed the rules, any under 15. Looking at 11 to 18-year-olds, 1 in 3 girls claimed to have self-harmed, and 1 in 12 boys did. And that hit the Observer twice. And it just, I believe, there are other examples when you could do this. And working often with a PR company, I believe, can be very, very fruitful and money-making. To show your excellence. I mean, that's what I'm trying to, how do you demonstrate your excellence? And you are, all of you.
In some sectors, I'm very fortunate to work in sort of tourism, travel, culture, that sort of area.
Good.
There is a lot of openness there. And in fact, I've spent the past 2 days at the Museum and Heritage Show, and one of the papers that was delivered there was delivered by one of the ICG members, Hugh Goldstone, as a joint paper with somebody from the Cutty Sark in Greenwich. And that sort of opportunities to actually get out and present papers to other professional bodies rather than into the market research industry can be very, very valuable if you're lucky enough to be in the sort of sector that we are. I've done a lot of that in the past, but in my pre-ICG days. So some sectors do lend themselves to that sort of thing. But trying to get out into other professions, as it were, is desirable.
I think partly our message is a bit of a complicated one.
Right. In
that, because we've been there, done that, the message that we're trying to give is we actually do know what we're talking about, but the way we demonstrated it by talking to you about your particular issue and your situation, and we can talk to you in a very mature, sensible, practical, cost-efficient way that may be refreshing. That's to get that over in a short headline or message is actually quite hard.
And yet McKinsey and do it.
Robin, sorry.
I think it's got 10 times more difficult now. It's all social media, Twitter and LinkedIn, etc., etc., etc. It's not like you read campaign, PR Week, Marketing Week, Marketing Management Today or the FT, and you get the article. There's so much information overload being pumped out.
But isn't that an opportunity as well? Particularly, I think the Facebook, Twitter bit, I think are fabulous opportunities for people.
Do you
like
tweet? Do you tweet?
Yeah, not very often, but yes.
What do you tweet about?
Don't sound so surprised.
Well, not dissimilar from, it's largely family.
Oh, okay.
So very close community.
Yeah.
But I think those of you who do work in communities really could, I mean, I think it's a wonderful source of data. I don't have to tell you that, but it's a wonderful source of data.
Can I just ask, you've been in the industry since 1965 and possibly before that as well, but certainly, and have seen market cycles come and go and market ideas and the latest thing is this and all the rest of it. As indies, we have far fewer resources to respond to those challenges, both economic and from within the industry. How do you think that as indies we can best respond to some of the challenges that market cycles throw out? I know that's a huge question.
Could you open it to everyone here?
Yeah,
I
sure.
mean, I've got my views, but I think I'd love to hear yours on this, and I'll shut up for a minute.
Personally, I think it's an advantage to have been through several cycles. I've been in the business for 30 years, or whatever I say. I find it very strange that there are graduates out there interpreting data on recessions. When that's the first one that they've come across, and everything is very new. If I've been through 3 of those, then surely that's got to make a difference in terms of what I can say about that situation and how we know the situation's usually resolved.
I was going to say, I think one of the great advantages of membership of ICG is, although it doesn't have a matrix organisation, it's got a wonderful matrix of, if you like, vertical industry specialists, topic specialists, whatever, and technique specialists, some of whom are the same people, but there are both. As I say, I've got a particular industry specialism, but the amount that I know about online qualitative could probably be written on a speck of dust. But I have every confidence that if such a thing came my way, it would take but one post, wouldn't it, to have the 5th Cavalry riding over the horizon with bugles blowing.
Yeah.
And I think from looking at it narrowly from an ICG point of view, that can be tremendously helpful. If we can then, also pick up Robin's point, that a lot of the clients that we work with are people that we know, have known for many, many years. And they're also the source of new business as well. Bless them, every now and again they keep moving on to new jobs. Play it right and they take you with them. Play it doubly right and they leave you behind as well. And that can be beneficial for that personal relationship to justify, yeah, I know I'm only me working in the front room in my house in New Malden, but I've got all this family, to use Arthur's word, with me.
Haven't you just answered the question? I think the answer is you've got to do it as a group. You can't do it individually. And the very fact that you are offering each other support makes, and being able to pick on the wisdom of that guy who does, qual, I just think makes you very strong.
That's the difficulty though, isn't it? Getting across the idea that we have that expertise and that people will value that expertise over and above valuing a brand of a research company. Because that's always the IBM question, it's always the easy one to go with, isn't it?
Yes.
And so it's quite difficult for us to break in. Individually we can do it, with individuals within companies, but I don't see Barclays turning around and saying, well, Mitch, you can do all our research for us. It just won't work like that. I'm always going to be a specialist niche operator.
But I think putting the ICG hat on for a minute, what we're really looking for is for somebody to be able to judge that, you remember the ICG, I know that means something. And I want to come back to this issue of professionalism, CPD, MRS. In my opinion, the MRS bottled it with CPD by not making it compulsory.
Oh, agree with that, totally. But none of you will remember the ridiculous thing in 1959 when the associate members of the MRS, the recommendation for the council was that full membership should be through examination only. The stupid chairman of the MRS, who was head of market research at Heinz, gave the vote to associates as well as full members. I mean, hence turkeys voting for Christmas. It was turned down. And twice we have actually almost rejected that form of professionalism. I agree with everything you say. It's
But
very
I'm now
sad.
called, by the way, 2 days ago they made me a fellow.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Wonderful.
But could I have to sort of call you Sarah Bauer?
Yes.
But the thing is, the CPD programme, and if you're now a full member as was, you're now called a certified member.
Correct.
But you don't have to do anything to be a certified member.
Yes.
So what are you certified to
Yes,
do?
you do. Yes, you actually do have to attend certain courses. No,
No, you
I
don't.
like. Yes, you do.
For CPD, you do, but you don't have to do CPD to retain your certified status, and that, to me, is the problem. That's what accountants have to do, and all the other professions.
Yeah.
We don't have to do it, and why not? So I'm challenging you here. That's
No,
not
no,
meaning
it's
to, but
fair
because you've
point.
got MRS hat on,
yeah.
you know.
There are exceptions, and let me just try and make up one to make it anonymous.
Don't go for it.
A person had been head of market research for the IPA for 6 years and brought in all of the touch point research tools. Should that person not be considered to be equivalent of a fellow without any extra training?
But
So-
the argument there would be that the market is changing so quickly and there are so many developments that what you knew 10 years ago may or may not be relevant today.
True.